Hello Year 10. Today we're going to be talking about some of the key quotations from My Last Duchess. I won't be going through the whole poem, we'll just be focusing on the quotations that we think you need to know at this moment. And usually before any examination we would ask you to focus on maybe 3 or 4 quotations per poem. So these are some of the most important ones in this poem we're going to look at today. What I would like you to do though is to have the quotations that you've copied down in front of you so that you can make the notes as I'm talking to you, just like we would in class. So the opening of the poem is very important, as it is with all poems, and in this poem Browning really establishes the idea of the power and the dominance of the Duke. And he does this through the possessive pronoun firstly in his title, My Last Duchess, and also in the first line of the poem this is really established. So that's My Last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. So this my is a possessive pronoun. And this really makes it seem like the Duchess is his possession. Okay, not just the painting but the actual person. So this makes it seem like he owns her. And also you could link that quite easily to context, because during the Victorian times when the poem was being written, wives were the possessions of their husbands. They owned them, they literally owned them through the dowry that they would receive from when they got married. So and all the wealth that the female had would go to the husband. So you could link that to the not only the Renaissance context but also to Victorian context. The wife, property of the husband. So immediately the main theme of the poem is established, this sense of power and dominance. If you wanted to, I've put some quotations as well in pink, the ones I haven't asked you to copy down, and these are sort of extension quotations, because if you're going to go for a grade 7 or above, really you need to be linking to other quotations within the poem. So you may or may not want to add these notes down now, but I also think another way we can see how dominant and powerful the Duke feels is in this little bit down here, where he is speaking to the messenger and he says to the messenger, "Since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I." So the painting was behind a curtain, strangely enough, and the Duke at this point in the poem, in the dramatic monologue, has pulled aside the curtain, please ignore my drawing, has pulled aside the curtain to reveal this painting of the Duchess. Okay, isn't she attractive? And the fact that he is now unveiling her really reiterates the power control he has. He didn't have as much control over her in her life. Well, now we assume she's died, that he controls who can look at her and who cannot look at her, something you can't do with a person when they are alive. So this really shows a real sinister side to that character. And also for a grade 7, 8 and 9 you might also want to be thinking about this close rhyme here of by and I, which really emphasises the tight control he wants to have over her even though she is dead. Okay, so we've got this rhyming couplet which shows the tight control he wishes to have even though the Duchess is dead. Nice. This is also shown through the line just underneath it, line 11, which says, and seemed as they would ask at me if they durst, which means if they dare. So he is aware, and perhaps wants people to be scared of him. So the main first quotation you need to be writing about is this possessive pronoun in my last Duchess, which makes it sound like he owns her, and he wants to own her. And the reason we also know that, the additional quotation I might put with that, is the fact that he has now, since she's dead, put a curtain in front of this painting so that he can control who can look at her, which is something he couldn't do when she was alive. Okay, so the next quotation I asked you to write down was this one. And this is the reason I asked you to look at this one down here, is because it really shows what he thought of the Duchess when she was alive, and how it really highlights his jealousy. So let's just read it. It says, she had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Wow. So he sounds really critical of her, really critical and very jealous. We all know he means, he's speaking in quite plain, pleasant language, but actually what he is actually saying is quite nasty. He's saying that she's very flirtatious and that she looked at everybody and she couldn't keep her eyes off people. So he's a very jealous man. There's no proof that she did look at everybody, but that's his perception of her, and that's what he is saying. So what can we say about this in terms of language? So the things that really make him sound critical of her is that he says, she had a heart, how shall I say, how can I put it? He's really saying, how can I put it? He says, she's too soon made glad and too easily impressed. The adverb here, these adverbs, to, make him sound critical, like she had too much of something. She was easily impressed. He's really criticizing her. He is really criticising her behaviour and the way she was. But then it says, she liked whatever she looked upon, and her looks went everywhere. When he says whatever she looked upon here, this is really a euphemism. Okay, he doesn't mean she liked whatever she looked on. She likes all the nature in the world. She liked cats, she likes dogs, she liked the sky, she liked the sea. He means there, she liked all the men she looked at. So he is playing with language and suggesting that he's jealous because he thinks she fancies everybody. So this euphemism here for whatever is a euphemism for men. And also, you'll notice that the sentence really builds here. This is quite a long sentence within this dramatic monologue. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. So there's lots of enjambment in this line, in these lines here. So the enjambment, I'll just copy that, I'll just write that down. The enjambment, which is when one line runs into another, lots of lines running into another there, that creates a sense of the Duke's anger running away with him. You know, when you have that sense of you're really frustrated with something, or you're really angry about something, and you're arguing with somebody, and it's just, oh, and another thing and another thing, and the sentence becomes quite long in what you're trying to say because you're so angry. Well, that's the sense here that we get of the Duke as well, through the use of the enjambment, because the sentence is running away with him to show just how the anger is running away with him as well. So the enjambment creates a sense that I do hope you can read my handwriting. Actually, you'd be able to tell me in class, wouldn't you, if you couldn't? Usually people can't. Let me just move the book up a bit. The enjambment creates a sense that the Duke's anger is running away with him. That's when it's getting the better of him, really. even though he's using euphemism, which shows he's controlling his language, he's being quite clever with his language, quite covered and closeted with his language. He doesn't want to say, oh, she was a flirt and she fancied everybody. So he says it in quite a nice way, almost to sound pleasant about her. We have lots of clues that he's being critical by saying to, repeating the adverb to, and also through the enjambment, which shows that he is getting more and more angry about the situation. Brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to skip quite a bit of the poem now to get to the crux of the matter, to see what happened really. And we see further euphemism in the next quotation I asked you to highlight, which was, this grew, I gave command, then all smiles stopped together. I'll just read the bit before it so you can see where that comes into the poem. This is where he's got quite angry, and I'm sure you've picked up on this quotation for the first task of the day, where as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody else's gift, and also oh, she smiled at her husband, no doubt, whenever I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile? So we get a sense that he didn't feel very special, that he felt like he was being treated the same as everybody else, that she didn't respect him enough, and he thought that she needed to respect him a lot more. Anyway, then we get to the crux of it, and he says, this grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. And this is one of the very few really short sentences in the poem, and it is euphemistic as well, because when he says I gave commands, we assume this is a euphemism for an order for her death. Okay, so we assume that he's had her murdered.
Mama?
Just 1 second, Florence. I'm just recording something for Year 10s. My daughter's just dropped in as well, so say hi, Florence.
Hi.
Say hello. Right, now go and have your ice cream.
Mummy.
Off you go. No.
Mummy, Roger gave us an ice cream and he said, do you want one?
No, thank you. Off you go. Right, okay, where was I? Sorry about that. This grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. So this is a euphemism for the murder that we assume he's asked for. So euphemism, we assume for, that wasn't what I was going to write, was it? I've been put off now, but there we go. We assume for murder, and then all smiles stopped together. The language here is quite simple in comparison to the rest of the poem. It feels therefore quite cold and quite stark. And where we have this verb here, all smiles stopped together, it's quite dramatic and it feels very cold. There's no feeling in this. There's no feeling in this line at all. So we've got this verb here, makes it seem cold, makes it seem almost terrifying. Because he has used such simple language to describe something that is so awful. And in the little dramatic piece that you watched, the actor who was playing the messenger, who doesn't really say very much at all, or he doesn't say anything to see the messenger, I thought his acting was quite funny. At this point, this is where he looks horrified. So this is what we're supposed to assume about this quotation. I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. So the short sentence really highlights this caesura here. We've got a full stop in the middle of a line. So this is an example of caesura, and that really emphasises the finality of what has happened, the murder. Emphasises the finality of the murder. Okie dokie. So I have one final quotation that I want to go through with you. in most poems, the final line or towards the end of the poem is really significant, because this is the message that the poet wants to leave you with, and this is the message that Browning wants to give us of this Duke. And so the Duke and the messenger start to leave the house, and leave, and as they are leaving, they're walking back away from the painting, they stop. And then he says, the Duke says to the messenger, notice Neptune, though, taming a seahorse, thought a rarity, which Claus of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. So this is a statue, or some sort of it's a piece of bronze that has been made as Neptune, and Neptune is the god of the sea, and so this is a metaphor. This whole thing is symbolic, and it represents the Duke himself. So notice Neptune, though, taming a seahorse, thought a rarity. So this works on many, many levels. The first level is that this is a metaphor, and the Duke himself sees himself as a god, and he's been taming his seahorse, which is his wife, and he will tame the next wife that he has. Okay, so Neptune is a metaphor to suggest that the Duke sees himself as a god. He sees himself as that powerful. Sorry, I've gone off the screen again, haven't I? There you go. He sees himself as that powerful. The other thing that I think is really interesting about this is, also he begins this sentence with an imperative, so it's another commanding language. He's commanding the messenger to stop and have a look at this. So we are reminded of his power again. Notice Neptune, though, taming a seahorse, thought a rarity. Now, I don't know about you if you've ever seen a seahorse, but I'm not sure that seahorses need taming at any point at all. They seem like the most gentle creatures, and therefore this can be seen as a more extended metaphor that relates to the idea of Browning's attitude towards the lack of power that perhaps women have in society. And perhaps if you were going for a grade 7 up again, I'd be thinking about what Browning might be suggesting about men and women in society at the time. Okay, so taming a seahorse. Do women really need taming? Do they really need a husband to tame them? Is that really the role that we should have in society? I think that perhaps Browning was critical of that. Also, another thing you could mention is that this final part of the poem could be seen as a warning to the visitor, to the messenger who's come to relay that his next wife is expected to behave, and it's almost like this is a symbol of his expectations. So this is a warning to the next wife that comes. So notice Neptune, though, taming a seahorse, thought a rarity, is really a metaphor for the Duke to suggest that he sees himself as a god, but is also a warning for the next wife, as the messenger is about to leave, to suggest that you need to respect me, I'm godlike, I will tame you. But thirdly, and probably useful for grades 8 and 9 really, is the idea that what Browning might actually be saying about Victorian society and men and women, and how he sees that actually he's critical of the fact that women are still owned by the husbands. Okay, so there's some things to say about our key quotations. Obviously, when we come back to school, we will do some more annotations and we'll revise some of the things we've said today, and you may also have some different ideas that you can say about those quotations. So we will be using these quotations in our lessons today and tomorrow, so just make sure that you have as many notes written down as you can. Okay, thank you very much, and I'm sorry for the interruptions. See you soon.